Welcome. It's nice to be back together in the museum, and thank you for following us through the course of the year. And we look forward to this just unfolding even better than before. And today we are going to be talking about paint and gesture. And Maria Elizabeth is going to, we're going to focus the conversation on three artists who work very differently and yet have something very much in common concerning paint and gesture. And the first artist is Joan Mitchell. And I'm going to step out of my better stay here. I think it's pretty clear that this is someone who made paintings with accumulations of color. And she was very much inspired by her surroundings, her garden in France. Her studio and where she lived at the time was not far from Giverny, where Monet painted. And she took many of her cues from the natural world, which influenced her palette. But what we're really interested in here is how she applied the paint. And it looks like she used a number of sized brushes or perhaps painting knives, because the marks here are varied. Maybe the next slide, please. And so in Sunflower, you could see that it is very much cued to what we associate with the palette of a sunflower, but she's approached it very solid, and there's a lot of impasto in the work. And by that, I mean, it's thick paint. And we can achieve some of these effects with the materials that we have in the Parrish studio today. Maybe the next one, please. And here's another one, Woods Country, which again is a naturalistic palette. But there's a real variety of paint consistency in this, from thick to very thin, which we can see in the drips. Let's move ahead, please. And no rain as well. Again, note the variety of brush strokes. That's something that we could include in our own work. We have a variety of tools to work with here. And we'll try to keep this moving through the course of the workshop so that these images will come up again periodically for inspiration. The next one, please. This one is, I think, is quite beautiful. It's an amaryllis, and it's a very good example of gesture. As you could, it's more the experience of the amaryllis really forcing itself up and opening, and the palette is very exciting in this too. Next one, please. And an all-over painting that is certainly an approach here too. It's titled EC, so I imagine it means where she is. And but it is a more of an all-over painting. It's also a later painting. It's 1992. The next one, please. And a garden, which with a lot of green and a lot of strong use of opposite color, which we talk about often here too. From working with cool colors and maybe having a warm accent. This is a very good example of that, as well as all of the methods of painting that she's included here, including some very loose paint, very thick paint, and accumulations of paint. The next one, please. Okay, we do have, we're talking about de Kooning next, and he's from the same period, abstract expressionist painter. And of course, they have this in common, but he worked very differently. Let me see the next one, please. Some of his work was, he worked on paper and newspaper. This happens to be in the Parrish Art Museum. And the next one, it's part of their permanent collection. This is a later work by de Kooning, prior to his death, and it shows a real maturity of how his sense of gesture changed through the years and towards the end of life. It seems, and there's a lot of conversation about this painting. If you're interested, I'd suggest looking at the Parrish website, East End Stories, for some more background on that, as well as any of the other artists we speak of as well. The next one, please. But this is the period that I'd like to address in de Kooning's work. And I didn't know this, but it explains a lot immediately. He didn't drive. And so when he would come back and forth from the city, he was a passenger. And he remarked how much he enjoyed looking at the scenery. He also said that the drive out wasn't a particularly beautiful drive. What he was interested in were the stretches of green along the side of the road, or the road itself. The next one, please. And this one's called Park Rosenberg. It's and he used a very wide brush, a house painter's brush, which he would boil in water to make it soft so that it would hold more paint. And he also added things to his paint. One of them, different types of oil, including linseed oil, but also poppy seed oil to make the paint go farther. But he did something really unconventional, and he added water to oil paint, which he whipped up. And the result was he had a little bit of a frothier consistency, but the paint left these little bubbles that had an atmospheric quality, which was something that he became sought after at a certain point. The next one, please. This one's called Merritt Parkway, and it illustrates that point about the drive out here. He moved out here permanently in 1963, but until then, he went back and forth. And you could see the large brush stroke in there as well. And these are large canvases, and it was he painted with a real arms gesture vigorously. And also, and I'll try to demonstrate it at some point, he also had this ability to make the brush, he twisted the brush at the end of the stroke. So it created this kind of exciting splatter quality, as though it was just freshly painted and remained that way forever. The next one, please. The other thing you might notice is that in this body of work, the palette is there's some consistency in it. And so what he did is he mixed up a quantity of paint, and he worked with that through a variety of paintings, and he made large quantities of the paint as well. The next one, please. This followed a trip to Cuba. He actually, it's a response to that. And again, you can see the very exciting brushwork. And the next one, please. And Door to River. This is beautiful too. And it's very light. He also added to these paintings a lot of white and titanium and zinc white, which created a very luminescent atmospheric quality, and that also added some body, I imagine, to the paint itself. Next one, please. Okay, and now we move on to Rasheed Johnson, and he's working today, and he's a contemporary living artist, and his work is in the Parrish Permanent Collection. This is the work that is currently in the museum on display, and I encourage you to visit it. And let me see the next one, please. And Rasheed Johnson not only worked with a great deal of gesture, he invented his own paint, and he made his own mixture, and he dubbed this color Anxious Red. But not only did he do that, he went one step further, and his work is very much all about gesture as well. And it feels very apropos to discuss him, because it's really the extension very much of what some of the abstract expressionist painters began. And although he's not working clearly in that movement, he's a contemporary artist, but I think that for our purposes, this discussion about paint and gesture, it's very elegant. This is one of the first paintings I saw by him at MoMA about a decade ago, and I was very taken by it. And it's a monochromatic painting. He's again invented his own medium, which I encourage all of you to experiment with as well, and we will be doing some of that here. But he refers to this combination of black soap and wax as cosmic slop. And then he applies it. I'm not quite sure how he spreads it, but perhaps with his hands, with a lot of gesture, and he makes marks. And there's something very freeing in all of this. And it's a large surface as well. And it engages also self-admittedly his body as he's working across and through the surface. The next one, please. And two more. And do we have another? That's it. Okay, and so now for our demonstration. One of the quick ways to add some consistency, increase in consistency to your paint, is to work with acrylic mediums. We're working with acrylic paint today here. This is something made by a paint manufacturer. It's called gel. You can also, it's like the thick version of polymer, and which one would glaze with. But you could add this to your paint to create achieve a thicker paint consistency. Another thing that artists used to do, they would add marble dust to their work and to their paint, often in oil painting, really, and it would create a chalkier, grittier, thicker paint to work with. Both of these techniques, this is spackle, by the way, regular household spackle. You can use, if you have like in your basement, you could use grout material. Might even try wood putty, but I would say start with smaller quantities and work up. But let's get started here. We will add. We'll make sure work with purple is sort of a nice go-to color, and so we have, as it is, this paint is fairly thick to begin with, but the additives here change the quality of it as well. So with the Liquitex or with the acrylic gel, it creates, it's like adding a thick glue to the paint. And if you add a lot of it, it will appear as a saturated color until it dries. When it dries, though, it might start to appear translucent or transparent if you've added a great deal. I'm going to work with a 1:3 ratio, so I'll never add more than 1/3 of the total amount to the paint. So this is about the proportion of the paint, and I'm going to add about, let's say, a teaspoon. And so mix this, and so essentially, let's see, these gels come in matte, and sometimes they come in gloss. And this, I can't tell what this is, but it won't matter for our purposes anyway. But it's matte gloss. Okay, that's good. So and I'm going to use one of the spackle materials. Now, what am I doing with this? Well, we'll end up having contrast, not just in color, but in paint finish as well, and consistency. the purple is going to come out gloss shiny, and this spackle that I add to it will create a more opaque, flat, chalky, gritty outcome. The acrylic is fairly glossy to begin with. And so if you don't want that, you might want to work with a gloss, a matte gel instead. Let's try, here, let's do some orange here. And here we go. Okay. Mix this up. I think for our purposes today, if you keep your palette somewhat limited, I would say maybe 3 colors, and perhaps if you would like them, if you want to work with warm or hot colors, make your third color a cool one. So for instance, I would probably add green here as my next color. Or if I wanted to keep this on the hot side, I probably would add yellow and use the purple as an accent. Okay, so there's a couple of ways you can start here. Because I have gloves on, and this is all about gesture today, paint and gesture, I could just use my hands. And that certainly is, and just apply it with the ultimate gesture, which is working with your hand. Okay, so here we go. This will be a matte finish. It's a little chalky. There's some thickness here, and then it's also a little bit thin here. And the way, don't need that. And then I'll begin to work some of this gloss purple in. So remember, this purple is not only going to be distinguish itself in thickness, but or color, but in also finish. It will be glossy. And so I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna use a brush now, a fairly thick, a large brush. And you'll notice the brush sizes we're working with are large, medium, and small. And let's see. And so I'm just going to include that in there. And then to further demonstrate paint quality, I'd like to make an area solid. And this is the gloss again. I'm going to use the tongue depressor. This could be like a palette knife. This is what we have instead. And I'm going to try to really apply it solidly. I think probably a little bit like if you're frosting a cake maybe and trying to do a good job of it, if that's possible. And, okay, and so we have this area in here too. So here we do have to begin with a loaded brush, which is a very thick area. We've worked wet on wet back into it with a contrasting finish and a loaded brush. And then this has been spread with the knife or the tongue depressor. But in this area, we have the option too, because the paint's so thick, we can also, as Rasheed Johnson in his painting, we can also, make marks into this thing too, and work with it. This paint becomes not just color; it's material itself, and find ways to move through this and experience it. Okay. Okay. Well, I think that's enough demonstration. This is going to be really something that's up to you. you have any questions, I'll be here with the material, so I could certainly advise you. But I would suggest keeping your palette limited, about 3 colors. If you have any questions, if you and go for something that interests you, that you feel passionate about to begin with, that you have some feeling about, and try both materials. You have two canvas boards. On one of them, I would just really experiment and try everything out. It's not as though you have to make a masterpiece on any of these, but on that one in particular, use it a bit as a sampler to explore the material. One thing I didn't try was that we could add some water into this story, and that also gives us another way to work too. So let's turn it this way here. Okay, that's not a lot, but anyway, here, that's something. Here we want it to be like Joan Mitchell. We really get wet with it, and there's some drips that are cheap. Okay, so let's get started. And if you unwrap your canvas board, you'll note that you have some containers to mix in. Some are like a little bit like your palette, the flat plate. The container with empty one is for water, so you keep your brushes in those so that they don't dry out. And that's great. Thank you.